Right, good afternoon, guys, and welcome. Unfortunately, Brandon's not available this afternoon, so I will actually be doing this lesson. My name is Riaz Mohammed, and welcome. Brandon had indicated to me that he was actually going to be looking at mathematical operators today, and let's get started with that. So, when you're looking at Python, we have different mathematical operators that you could actually use to do lots and lots of different mathematical operations, right? And one of the things you need to understand is how these operators actually work and what type of data is actually going to give you when you execute it and use it. Now, one of the things that I actually want to look at is we want to look at, firstly, oh, just give me a moment. Let me just get rid of that right. Now, we are basically looking at calculations, and I'm going to use all of these different operators to show you how those calculations actually work. Now, I want you to look at this before we actually look at Python itself, and we're going to go through this very briefly. Firstly, we obviously have multiplication, division. We have two types of division, guys. We have multiplication, we have division, and we have integer division. Now, the first type of division is a single slash, and that is called real division. Why real division? Because it will actually give you a decimal answer. So if you look at 8/3, 8 divided by 3, you're looking at 2.666 recurring. That is a decimal number, that is a real number. Now, if you look at the same question with a double slash, which is integer division, it's only going to give you the whole number part. So if I look at 8/3, from that answer there, it only gives you the whole number part. It actually drops the decimal part. So depending on what exactly your program is, your program requires you to do, you would use the appropriate type of division. Then you are looking at addition. Addition is simple, that's plus. Everybody knows what that does, hopefully. Then we have subtraction, right? And basically where you are subtracting one number from another. So obviously 8 minus 3 is 5. This is a very, very interesting, very interesting operator, and it's called modulus. We actually refer to it as mod. And it's quite interesting simply because you are dividing two numbers and you do not want the answer, you want the remainder. So if you look at this here, if you're looking at 6 mod 4, right? 6 mod 4, 4 can go into 6 one time. And what's left? You're left with 2. Right? We're going to be looking at a Python program with all of these operators just now. And then we have a power. Now, obviously, if we need to square a number or cube a number, etc., right, you will use a power. So you're raising one number to the power of a second number. So if you look at this here, this would read as 3 to the power 4, which will give you 81. So let's go and see how exactly something like this would actually work. Okay. Right. I'm just going to run this just to show you, just to give you the output screen. Just give it a moment. And there we go. So if you're looking at this here, right, pretty straightforward. What we're going to do is this over here. We're going to be looking at the different operators. So it's very simple. I'm going to go and look at the first one, 3 times 4. Now, if you're looking at 3 times 4, and obviously you press enter, you're going to get 12. If I said 4 minus 9, I'm going to end up with minus 5. That's subtraction. Now, once again, if I said 12 divided by 5. 12 divided by 5. 5 can go there two times. It's going to be 2 point something, 2.4. Now that is real division. 2.4 is a real number. Now, if I look at the same question, but I used integer division, our answer should be 2. It drops off the 0.4. Right? Now, if I said 13 divided by 5, that's real division, it's going to be 2.6. If I said 13//5, it's still going to drop off the 0.6. It's just going to give me 2. Now, if I said 14 divided by 4, it's 3.5. 14 integer division 4, it's going to give me 3. Right? So that's just to show you how those actually work, right? And then we look at our very interesting one, 14 mod 4. So you got to ask yourself now, 4 can go into 14 3 times. Here we go. 4 can go into 14 3 times. And if I take away that 3 fours, 3 fours are 12. If I take away that 3 fours, what's left? Your remainder is 2. So if you look at a different type of example, another example, and if I said 4, 4 can go into 17 4 times, your remainder is 1. So if you look at mod is actually giving you a remainder, and it's a very, very interesting, mathematical operator, simply because it actually tells you something. Can you see these remainders over here? If I take any number, and this is an important concept to remember for forever. If I take any number, and if I mod it by 2, take any number and mod it by 2, my remainder, 2 can go into 12 6 times, my remainder is 0. If your remainder is 0, it basically means that 12 is an even number. So when you mod any number by 2 and the remainder is 0, it means it's an even number. If you take any number and you mod it by 2, what do you guys think the remainder over there would be? It would be 1. So anytime you mod any number by 2, if the remainder is 0, it's an even number. If the remainder is 1, it's an odd number. And you will use that later on. Okay, so just to run through that again, because I need the output screen. Okay, so if you look at all of our mathematical operators, it's pretty useful. Now, the one thing I do want to tell you is this. If you divide one number by another number, if you divide one number by another number, and if your remainder is 0, now obviously this is not going to be, we're not modding it by 2. Remember, to check for even or odd, we mod by 2. To check for even or odd, we mod by 2. All right. So what we're going to do over here is very, very simple. 24 mod 4, my remainder is 0. Now, what exactly does this mean? What exactly does that mean? It means that 24 is a multiple of 4. So the first number, if your remainder is 0, when you mod one number by a second number, if the remainder is 0, it means the first number is a multiple of the second number. And it also means that the second number is a factor of the first number. Okay? So that's basically our mathematical operators. Now, let's move on. Right? Let's go and look at something interesting. Okay, if I said, read in a number and determine and output the square. Okay, now we are obviously going to be looking at a couple of things in this program, and you need to pay careful attention because you need to understand exactly what we're doing, right? Now, the first thing that when you read a question, you need to understand that there are three principles. There are three principles, right? Let's put in some comments over here. We have input, we have processing, and we have output. So with all programs, there are three parts to it. The first part is input. If there's any input, that means data we are giving to the program. Output is what do I do with the input to actually get the output? And processing is the actual manipulation of the data that is input, right? So when we're looking at input, a couple of things you need to understand. Firstly, the command that we use for input, that means we want the user to actually enter data here, right? We want the user to enter data here, right? We obviously, if the user is going to be entering data, we need something called variables. Now, a variable is basically a placeholder. A variable is a way for the program to remember data that you actually gave it, you, the user, actually gave it. So a variable can be any letter of the alphabet. It could be the name of anything. It could be anything. A few things. A variable cannot start with a number. A variable cannot have spaces. And one of the Python conventions is that all variables should be all lowercase. Your variable name could have numbers in it, digits in it, but it cannot start with a digit. So first things first, just to show you what I'm doing over here. If I'm gonna say all lowercase. I'm gonna say num1. How do we put data into a variable? How do we give data? How do we store data in a variable? We use an equal to sign, and your equal to sign is read as, this statement would read as num1 is assigned. Now, leave alone inputting. Let's just go and put a number here. Let's go and put 15. So basically, in your memory of your computer, your primary memory, there's a place called num1. And this num1 is going to store the value 15, right? So that's your 15. So num1 is 15. I want to calculate the square. To calculate the square, we multiply a number by itself. There are actually two ways of doing this. I'm going to show you both ways. So we multiply a number by itself. So if I'm going to be multiplying a number by itself, I'm going to get an answer. After I multiply this number by itself, I'm going to get an answer, and I need to store that answer somewhere. So I need another variable to store my answer, and this is the processing part. So how do you find the square of a number? You multiply the number by itself. And obviously, I'm going to need a variable to store the answer. I'm going to call the variable answer is assigned. It's going to take on num1 times num1. So what is the value in num1 at the moment? 15. What is the value in num1? 15. So basically, this at this point is going to work out 15 times 15, which is 225. And that 225 would get stored in answer. So num1 has the value 15. Answer will only get its value once this processing has taken place. So you've got num1 times num1, 15 times 15, which is 225, and that's going to be stored in answer. And to display, we use the print statement. Remember that. We use the print statement, And what am I going to print? I'm going to print answer. So let's go and see whether this actually works. And we are going to be looking at making this here a little bit more user-friendly. There you go, you got 225. And it's just outputting the 225. Because num1 is 15, it's working out 15 times 15, and it's just going to print the answer. Now here's the thing. Each time I run this program, it's going to give me 225, 225, 225 every single time because num1 is 15. If I wanted to find the square of a different number, I would actually have to come into the program and I would actually have to change it. Let's say 67. And if I run this now, it's going to give me a different output. So each time I need a different number, I need to actually go into the program and keep changing this, which is not very general purpose. It's not very useful. It's not very easy to use. Because remember, when you are designing software, you are designing it for people who are actually not computer programmers. They don't know how to code. They're just going to run the program, right? So they wouldn't know that they actually have to come in here. So how do we actually go about alleviating that problem? It's very simple. We actually get the user to enter whatever value they want. And how do we do that? It's very simple. We use this command here. We use input. So when we use input is to allow the user to enter data, right? So what exactly is going to happen here? You can see I have input there, right? But inside the brackets, I need to make the program user-friendly. So I'm going to type in within quotes, enter a number. So when I run this program, this is going to display a message and it's going to wait. Input is going to wait for the user to enter a number. When the user enters a number and presses the enter key, that number that the user entered would go and get stored in num1. And whatever number the user entered, whatever number, right? Whatever number the user entered, it would go and work it out here. It will store it there and it will display it. So let's go and look at this. Oh, by the way, it's not going to work. Just letting you know. So I'm going to enter the number 10. It should give me 100, yeah? And it's going to give me an error. And it's going to give me an error, right? So when you are looking at data types, we have four general data types that we actually use. We have string, which can store any letters of the alphabet, any character, spaces, anything on the keyboard. We have int, which is integer, positive and negative numbers, including 0. We have float, which is actually real, basically means all numbers. And we have bool, which is true or false. It can either be true or false, right? So coming back to this, right? What was our error? Let's go read the error. Okay, this is where the error actually occurred. Can't multiply sequence by non-int of type string. I know that sounds confusing. It basically is saying that it can't multiply these two numbers because these two numbers are of type string. That means I cannot say apple times banana equals pears because they're letters of the alphabet. Do you understand? So here's the thing, and you need to remember this, that the input command always reads values as strings, as letters. So you cannot carry out mathematical operations on letters. Now, one thing you need to understand, what Python actually does is that when it actually gets data, when data is actually stored in a variable, Python so-called looks at the data, determines what data type it is, and it creates that data type. So num1 at this point, even though I entered a number, it's going to store it as a string because input always inputs as a string. So how do I alleviate this problem? So num1 at the moment is string, right? So at the moment, num1 is a string. How do I make it a number, right? We use something called typecasting, right? We use something called typecasting. Now, typecasting basically means we change the data type. So at the moment, num1 is string. I want to make it an integer. And trust me, guys, it's not difficult, right? It is not difficult to actually convert it. I'm going to show you one, right? So now watch this over here. I'm going to go with num2 is assigned. This is very, very simple. I want to take num1 is a string, and make it an integer. And the data type, like I showed you just now, the data type is int. The data type is int, right? There's our typecasting over here, and we'll look at that just now. All right, so I want to make num1 into an integer. So what's happening over here? It's going to check now that num1 has only digits. Yes, it does. It's going to convert it to an integer, and it's going to store it in num2. So my numerical value of my input is in num2. So I'm going to come here and say num2 times num2. So let's go through that again. Input always reads data in as a string. Even though you're entering a number, it's going to read it in as a string. Now, because it's a string, and I do want to carry out a mathematical operation on this, I'm going to come here and convert num1 into an integer, store it in a different variable. So when I want to work out the square, now remember num1 is a string value, num2 is the numerical value, numerical equivalent. So num2 times num2 will be giving me my square. It'll be stored in answer, and I'll display the answer. So let's go try that out. So let's enter a number. I said, let's go with 25. That should be 625. There we go, 625. Now I want you to see this here. Same program, run it again. And this is how powerful and useful your input statement actually makes it, because you can enter any number. Every time you run it, you enter a different value. You can go with 137, and it will work out your square every single time for different values. So now the program became a little bit more general purpose, because we are giving the user the choice, right? We are giving the user the choice to determine what number is going to be input. So we looked at input, and remember, we want to make our program user-friendly, right? And we are outputting answer over here. Got it? Now, I just want to make this a little bit more user-friendly. Now, remember, right? Now, don't know whether if Brendan actually did this with you, right? But I'm just going to do this very, very quickly. Wait, let's just go look at a different one. Okay. We don't worry about that right now. Don't worry about that question. We're going to come to that just now. Okay. If I said print, okay, before I do that, I'm just going to go over here. Num is assigned 12, right? I'm going to come over here and say print, in quotes, remember, your mark is, and I'm going to come here and say print num, right? So if you look at this, guys, what is it going to do? There we go. Your mark is 12 on two separate lines. Doesn't look very, very useful, because It's two separate lines. Now, what if I actually wanted to put them on a single line and put them in a single print statement? How do I go about doing that? Now, generally, to join strings, right? Generally, to join strings, just put a comment over here, to join. Now, another word for join, guys, and you'll find that in the programming world, they use this word over here. Concatenate. Concatenate. Concatenate means to join. So to join strings, we use a plus symbol, right? To join strings, we use a plus symbol. Now, what exactly does that mean? Right? Let's assume I had a variable called display is assigned. Now check this out. And if I said the quick brown plus car, right? The quick, oh, sorry, need another single quote there. Delete that. Okay. And I'm going to come here and say car crashed. So what exactly is happening here? The phrase the quick brown with the space and the car crashed will be joined and it will become one string and it will be stored in display. So I'm just going to make this a comment for now, just so you can not see that. Okay. And I'm going to come here and say print display. So what exactly is going to happen here, guys? Well, don't worry about the num is assigned 12. And it reads as num is assigned 12. It's going to take the phrase the quick brown with the space. It's going to take car crashed, and the plus is going to join them and make them one string and store it in display. So when I print display, can you see that? The quick brown car crashed. It's in one statement. All right. Now I'm going to comment that out. And comment that out because I want to come here now, back to this. And how do we join this? So once again, I'm going to use a variable called display. I actually like doing this. Is assigned. What do I want to display? I want to display your mark is. And what did I say we use to join? We use a plus symbol. And what is the mark? The mark is stored in num. Right? The mark is stored in num. Okay, I'm just going to comment this out because this is the original one, right? And I'm going to come here and I'm going to display. And how am I going to display it? I'm going to use the print command, right? And I'm going to go with which variable stores what I want to display, the variable display. And we have an error. So what exactly is the error? Your mark is, this is the statement that the error occurred, and it's very, very simple. What type of error it is? Can only concatenate string to string. It cannot join a string and an integer. It cannot join a string and an integer. So here we have a problem. So print displays strings and it can display numbers separately, but together that becomes a problem. So what do? We use something called typecasting once again, right? Like I told you just now. Okay, what do? We don't want, now I want to display num, right? So it must be a string. So my typecast will be str. So what's happening here now? You are going to take num, convert it into a string, and then join it to your mark is. So let's go run that and see how that works. There we go. One statement. your mark is 12. Okay, so if you really look at this, it's not very, very complicated, right? It is not complicated at all. So if you need to display a string and a number, you obviously have to typecast the number into a string, and you can join it to whatever string you want, any other string you want to display it. So it's very simple. All you have to do now is this, all right? We looked at that question over there, reading a number and determine and output the square. Over here, right, we looked at how you would join a string and a number by casting it into a string, and you're going to do that. So let's change this question a little bit. Write a program that will read in to numbers and determine and output A, the sum, B, the product, C, the first number raised to the power of the second number. All right. So we got a few things to actually do here. So let's look at that. Right? I am actually going to take that out. Okay. So step one, remember I told you we have input, we have processing, and we have output. So let's just go and put our comments over there. So for later references, we can see exactly what we were doing and where we were doing it. Now, when you read a question, when you read a programming question, you have to ask yourself, you have to determine from the question, you know what exactly is my input and what exactly would my output be? So write a program, fine, that will read into numbers. Now you're going to read into numbers, you're going to input to numbers, and the command that we use in Python to input values is input. Now, if I'm going to read into numbers, I need two variables to actually store those two numbers. So I need to think about, okay, what's going to be meaningful? And it's pretty straightforward. Now, to remember, I've got num1. Oh, sorry. Num1 is assigned input. And we're going to get in there and say, enter first value. Okay. And I'm going to have num2 is assigned input, enter second value. All right. But here's the thing. Right now, when the user enters, when this program runs, num1 and num2 are going to be strings because the input command only reads strings. Okay? Your input command only uses strings. Now I need to take num1 and I need to take num2 and I need to make them integers. How do I go about doing that? Once again, we are going to typecast, right? We are going to typecast. That means we're going to change num1 into an integer and num2 into an integer. Now in the previous program, here, guys, you'll notice that I typecast num1 and I stored it in num2. All right, we can do that. Or we can do the following, and this is one of the most interesting things about Python. Check this out. At the moment, num1, after these two statements are executed, num1 is string and num2 is string. But check this out. If I come here and say num1 is assigned int num1, do you guys know what happens? What Python actually does is it will convert num1 into an integer. It will store it in num1, and num1 automatically becomes an integer of type integer. So it actually changes the data type. It changes the data type of that variable. So we can do the same thing with num2. And that would be int num2. So basically what happens in my typecast? We used the int command, the int typecast, to change the data type of num1 and num2. And after this statement, sorry, after this statement, num1 and num2 are integers. So we have three things to do. I need to determine the sum, I need to determine the product, and I need to determine the power. Okay? So I have to do three things. So my input, I had to input two numbers. That's what I did. That's my input and my typecast. Fine. So remember, whenever we're inputting numbers, we're going to input and we're going to typecast. I'm going to show you something just now, how we can skip this part over here and we can do quite a bit of stuff in one go, but we'll wait for that just now. So these are my outputs. I need my sum for my output, I need my product, and I need the first number raised to the power of the second number. How do I go about doing that? So under processing, now remember, if I'm calculating the sum, I need a variable to actually store that answer. If I'm calculating the product, I need a variable to store that answer. All right, so I'm going to call the variable sum. It's not very original, is assigned num1 plus num2. So it's going to take num1, num2, add it up, store it in sum. Okay, for my product, I'm going to go and call it product, is assigned num1. Product is what mathematical operation? Multiplication. So it's going to be num1 times num2. And lastly, we have the first number raised to the power of the second number. And if we go back here and look at this, oh no, that's not that. It's this here. How do we raise one number to another number? Sorry, it's a double asterisk. So let's come back here, right? Let's come back here and work out the power. I'm just going to call it, expo, is assigned the first number, which is num1, raised to the power, double asterisk, raised to the power num2. Oh, you'll notice that the word sum is in purple. Now, what does that basically mean, guys? If it's in purple, it means it's a reserved word. That means I can't use it as a variable. You got it? So I'm just going to call it sum, right? If you use a variable name, if you create a variable and if it's in purple, that means you cannot use it as a variable because it's a reserved word. Okay, so coming back here now, come back here, I need to display my sum, my product, and my power. So we use print, and I'm going to say the sum equals and plus. Now remember, sum is an integer. I need to join it to a string. So before I actually display it, I need to cast it into a string. Remember that? We did that just now, right? So both sum, product, and expo, we need to cast it into a string because we want to make it user-friendly. We can just display the sum, but it means nothing, right? And then we go print the product equals plus, I can't put product, remember, I have to typecast, right? And lastly, the, first number raised to the power of the second number equal and plus, and once again, typecast. And which variable stores my power? Expo. So let's go through this. Firstly, the user entered the first number, it'll be stored in num1 as a string, because remember, input reads data, all data as a string. Second value is input as a string and it's stored in num2. Under typecast, I'm going to cast num1 into an integer and I'm going to store it back in num1. So num1 will actually change from a string to an integer. And then we have num2, which will also change num2 into an integer. My processing to calculate the sum, it's num1 plus num2. To calculate the product, I missed out the one here, right? It's num1 times num2. And to work out the first number raised to the power of the second number, num1 star star num2. To display, print the sum equals, and because I'm actually joining it to another string, I have to cast sum into a string. The same with product and the same with expo. Now all that's left to do is run it. So let's go and look at something. Let's go look at two simple numbers. Let's go and enter 2 and 6. So before we actually press enter, 2 plus 6 is 8. 2 times 6 is 12. And 2 to the power 6, I think, is 64. Can you see that, guys? The sum equals 8. The product equals 12. The first number raised to the power of the second number, 2 to the power 6, is 64. Right? You can run it again. And you can go and enter 4. And you can go and enter 3. Let's go and enter 6. Let's see how big that number is. Oh, there we go. 4 to the power 6. 4 plus 6 is 10. The product is 6 times 4 is 24. And 4 to the power 6 is 4096. So if you look at this, right? Basically, what we have over here is a simple program where from the question, we identify what's going to be input, what's going to be output, and what must I do to the input to get the output. All right. So coming back here. Where was that? Oh, no. Sorry, wrong one. I think it's here. These are your variables. There's your data types, right? Yes. And we're looking at typecasting. Can you see that? Okay. So I'm just going to scroll through this over here. You can convert from int to float. You can convert from float to int. Now check this out. Float is a real number, remember that. So if I got b is assigned 25, if I say float b, it'll become 25.0. It'll make it a real number. It'll give it a decimal. Now, if you're looking at float to int, if you got a real number, 89.67, and you're converting it to an integer, you're casting it to an integer. Can you see that? N has the value 89.6. Int n, it will just drop the decimal part. No matter how big it is, it'll drop it, and it'll make it 89. It'll just give you the whole number part. From string to int, if it's a string, this is what we're using in our input box. It's inputting as a string. And when we use int, it'll convert it into a number. All right. And then we got from string to float, right? It'll make 27 into 27.0. And then you have int to string. We use that for our output. Remember that in our print statement. And then we have float to string, right? What it'll basically do is it will make it a string. That means it'll put quotes around it. Okay. So what was this? And all right. Okay. This was pretty straightforward. So looking at a real world type of problem, or a problem like you get in school, read in the length and breadth of a classroom and determine and output A, the perimeter of the room, and B, the area of the room. So once again, you need to identify what you're going to input, what you're going to output, and basically your processing is what must I do to the input? How must I manipulate the input to get the output? All right. So looking at that there, and just to refresh your memories, for those of you who have forgotten, hey, there we go. That's your rectangle. Imagine that this is a room. Imagine that this is a room, and this, oh, let's just move that up, right? And that is your breadth. That's the breadth of the room. And that is your length. And guys, how exactly do we calculate perimeter? Right? So you have to ask yourself, perimeter is going to equal to length plus breadth plus breadth, which actually can be written as mathematically, and you all should know this, right? Which would equal to 2 length plus 2 breadth. Now, one of the things we're actually going to be looking at right now is how you would actually take a formula and convert it into programming. 2 length plus 2 breadth. This actually means times, guys. This actually means times, right? So I'm just going to come here, put in a P, okay? Copy that out. And come here. Where was that? Was that here? Right. Okay, so perimeter, and I'm just going to paste that there. Okay, that's my formula. And then obviously, how do I find area? Area is pretty straightforward. It's going to be length times, I'm going to use the asterisk, times breadth. Okay, let's see if we have that here. Yeah, there we go. Length times breadth. So copy that out. Okay. Now, if we're looking at this, remember I told you input, processing, and output. So you need to ask yourself, what exactly do I need to be input and how many inputs? I need to input the length and I need to input the breadth. So let's go put in comments. I need my input. I need my processing and I need my output. So looking at the question, Read in means input. Or if they tell you allow the user to enter, it means input. Or it means capture from the keyboard, it means input, right? There are lots of different ways of actually saying input. So I need to input what? I need to input the length and the breadth. So how many inputs do I have? I have 2. So once again, give them meaningful names. Length is assigned input. Yep. Input. And I'm going to come in there and say enter length. Oh, sorry about that. Length of room. Okay. And then I'm going to come here and say breadth is assigned input, enter breadth of room. So I'm inputting those 2 values. But guys, once again, input reads both in as string. Input reads both in as string. So I'm going to come here and typecast it very quickly. I'm going to go with length. Oh, length is assigned, and I need to convert it into an integer. Well, I'm just going to use integers for now, right? We will use, Brandon will actually do float with you as well, right? So I'm going to go with int, and what am I converting? I'm converting length into an integer, and I'm going to overwrite the length. So the length as a string will be converted into an integer, and it'll be stored in length, and length will then become a number. Breadth is assigned int breadth. So I've got that. All right, I've got that. So I've got my length and I've got my breadth. So I want you to look at this now. 2L, it's actually 2 times L. So when you're converting into a programming language, when you're converting formulae into a programming language, we cannot just go and say 2 length. Sorry, it's going to be, now I need a new variable to store my perimeter, and that would equal to, now I'm going to show you, and this is actually the BODMAS rule, right? I'm going to do one calculation over here, and then there's a plus and another calculation in there. So what is the first part? The first part is 2 times the length. All right, so it's going to be 2 times the length. So we can't just write 2L or 2 length, it's 2 times. The in between, it's a times, and it's going to be plus 2 times the breadth, right? Using the BODMAS rule. So it'll work this out, then it'll work that out, and then it will add it. And then obviously we need another variable for our area, which would be length times breadth. So we have perimeter and we have area. Okay, so very quickly, we want to display, and we're going to come here and say perimeter equals, and it's going to be plus. Now remember, perimeter is an integer. I need to make it a string. So once again, we typecast and we go and put in, oh, can't spell, perimeter. And then we come with print area is equal to, and once again, typecast the area. So we have print perimeter and we have print area, and let's go try it out. We're almost out of time. Okay, so let's go and enter the room length is 6 meters and the breadth is 3 meters. Okay, so that should be 12 and that should be 18. Perimeter is 18 and area is 18. Okay, those are not very nice values. Let's go and choose different values. Let's go and enter 12 and 4. So the perimeter will be 32 and the area will be 48. So 2 times 12 is 24. And 2 times 4 is 8. 24 plus 8 is 32. That is not very, very user-friendly. So we can actually make it a little bit user-friendly just before we stop. Just a minute or so, and that would be plus meters. I'm going to come in over here and say plus meters squared. And if we run that very quickly, and you'll see now, right? Let's say we're going to enter 12 and enter 5. And obviously, I didn't leave a space there, but it actually makes it a hell of a lot more user-friendly. Perimeter equals 34 meters, area equals 60 meters squared, or 60 square meters, right? Thank you guys for joining, and that's quite a few of you. I hope you guys have actually found the session informative, and Brandon would be with you tomorrow. So have a good afternoon and practice. Thank you, and goodbye.